Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you are settling into 2021. Perhaps you are creating some new routines for yourself for the year, and I hope that movement in your body is going to be one of those routines. So today I wanted to talk about vinyasa. We hear that word a lot in yoga. And vinyasa has different meanings for different people, but basically vinyasa is when you join asanas together. An asana is a pose. So when you join poses together and string them into succession, you are creating a vinyasa. So many times you will hear a class is called a vinyasa flow. And that's basically what it is. You are piecing together the different poses and flowing them one after the other. I have to admit, it's one of my favorite styles of yoga, a vinyasa flow class. I like a nice slow vinyasa class. Not everybody does, but it's a popular one, and today we are going to investigate the vinyasa that you can put after down dog to get back into down dog. Now I know this is going to be confusing, and at first it's going to seem very complicated. There's so many things that you can do, but I want to break down the different stages and different modifications that you can use for your own personal being, and then you can start adding them into your flows. And again, this is something that you don't have to add into your flows. You can basically, when I was talking about down dog, you can come up into down dog and stay there and wait, or you can add this vinyasa. Now, basically, it's from down dog. We come forward into plank, and we already know this because we've already addressed that in previous videos. And when you come forward, you are in a high push-up. Your arms are extended, long, and you're at the top of the push-up. And what we're going to add in today is the lowering phase of that push-up. So you go from high push-up to low push-up. Now, today's video, we are going to come all the way down to the belly. And then you do a back bend where you lift your heart, head, shoulders up. And then you reverse that and you pike yourself up, back up into down dog. So as we go through the different modifications, like I said, it's going to sound very complicated and you're going to think, how am I going to remember all of those things? But you will. The more you do it and the more you investigate which option is best for you, it really actually is quite easy. So it's something that you can add in if you like. And it's something that you can add to your practice to give your body a little bit of extra work. Now, putting this particular vinyasa into your flow is definitely something that you can help to strengthen your arms, your shoulders. It's definitely some work in the upper body. There's a little bit of work in the legs as well, but I think that it's more work in the upper body. So if you feel that you are weak in the arms and shoulders, this is a nice way that you can start to incorporate a little bit of extra work so that you can build up strength. And I think that's a good thing, right? Building up some strength so that we can do those things that we want to do. It's not only coming to the mat and doing these poses. So today's video, a little bit on the shoulders and arms. So let's warm them up a little bit. So today, let's just start in tabletop. And when you set yourself up in tabletop, again, we want our hands underneath our shoulders and our knees underneath our hips. But before we start getting going into any movement and putting any more pressure into those hands, let's just kind of give them a little bit of a wiggle jiggle. So we'll just take one hand up off the floor and give them a couple of circles, a couple of flexion and extensions, just to kind of remind that wrist, it's like, okay, we're going to do a little bit of work today. Are you ready? And then I'm going to put that hand down and I'm going to do the same thing with the other hand. So just some circles, one way or the other. Some flexion extensions. And then I'm going to put them back into the floor and I'm going to set them up into my tabletop. Now in my tabletop here, I am going to tuck my toes under so that I can get a little bit of work in the ankles and in the arches. So just take a little bit of a lean back into those feet, ankles, and glutes. And then push yourself back up into tabletop. So we're just doing a little bit of movement. As we push our glutes, our bum back to our heels, we're taking the weight out of the wrists. And then when we come back into our tabletop, we're putting a little bit of weight into the wrists. So I'm just talking a little bit to my wrist to remind them, okay, we're going to have to do something. And each one of these movements gives me an opportunity to settle into my proper hand position. What is going to be my hand position today? And I can sync that up to my breath by taking an inhale to come forward to my tabletop and taking an exhale to sink down. I'm going to do 2 more here. And then in my tabletop, I'm going to reevaluate my hands. Are they in a good position for me today? Do they feel comfortable? Do I need to lift and reposition them into something that's a little bit more comfortable? And once I think I'm ready, I'm going to push into my hands. I'm going to tuck my toes under. I'm going to roll those triceps, open up my heart with my inhale. And with my exhale, I'm just going to go into a little bit of a down dog. So I'm going to keep my knees relatively bent. And I'm just going to push back. And then I'm going to come forward into my tabletop. Push back into your downward facing dog, trying to lengthen out that spine, and then come back into your tabletop. So as I push back, I probably notice that I have a little bit more work in the wrists. I have my shoulder doing some work. And when I come into my tabletop, it's a little bit less work. So I inhale, coming forward, and I exhale, coming back. So I'm just checking out the range of motion in my shoulders. I'll take 1 more, and I'll come into my downward facing dog, and maybe I'll do a little bit of a wiggle jiggle, pedaling out the heels, lengthening my legs, just kind of seeing if I can get a little bit more length into my spine. And then maybe lengthening out the legs. So the vinyasa that we are going to talk about today basically starts here, from your downward facing dog. And then you would take your inhale to come forward into your plank. I'm going to show the first one in a high plank. My arms are long. And what I'm going to do is lower myself down to the floor. And I'd like my chest and belly to come down at the same time. I'd like to keep my back in a neutral spine. And I'm going to use my exhale to push myself slightly forward and down both at the same time. Yeah? So from my plank, I'll come forward and I'll lower myself all the way down. Yes? Now, my toes are tucked under, and what I'd like to do first is untuck the toes. Now, I might find that when I lowered myself down, I didn't quite come forward, and I might feel that my hips and my hip flexors and my glutes are a little jammed up. So as I'm unhooking my toes, so you might have a look back at my feet, as I unhook, I point so that I extend my leg, and I bring the top of my foot down to the floor. And then I do the same thing on the other side. So I'd like to be able to push into the tops of my feet. Yeah? Now, for some people, that's going to be a little difficult, and you might have to kind of flex your feet a little bit so that you can get a nice length in your leg. And you just want to be careful here that you're not jammed up in your hip. So that's why we go for that little extension. Yes? And then start to pay attention to your elbows. Your elbows would like to be aiming to the back of the mat. So I'd like to kind of roll my shoulders back so that I open up the heart front, and I'm squeezing my elbows, squeezing my shoulder blades. And what I'd like to do is maybe move my hands just slightly back towards my feet. So I don't want to push them too far back here where my hand isn't flat. Can you see how my palm isn't on the floor? I want to push them back, but I still want to be able to keep the palm flat on the floor. Now, ideally, my arm here is making a 90-degree bend. I think on my particular arms, my forearm is a little bit forward. Why? Because my wrists and my shoulders are a little tight. So if you can actually stack your hand underneath your elbow to make 90 degrees, you go right ahead. I'm going to just push them back a little bit so that I can roll my shoulders, point my elbows, and I'm going to find my comfortable space. Yes? So that's what we've set up so far. I've set up my feet. I'm pushing the tops of the feet down. I have my palms down. I'm trying to square up or push the elbows back, and I'm trying to open up my heart center. Now, before we start lifting up into our back bend, we want to make sure that our low back is comfortable. So we kind of tilt our tailbone down. So you don't want to be pushing your belly into the floor, but you want to be pushing your pubic bone down into the floor. So I'm kind of lengthening out my low back here, and I'm tilting slightly my tailbone to my feet. Yes? So that my back is not going to get too uncomfortable. Now you're going to push into your hands and see if you can just lift your head, shoulders, and heart. Take your gaze slightly forward, push the elbows back, push into the tops of the feet, push your pubic bone down, and you're going to lift yourself up with an inhale into cobra. And then you will exhale down into the floor and release. Now you might need to, even with that one, wiggle, jiggle yourself a little bit. Now remember, we're not trying to point our tailbone up. We're trying to point our tailbone down. So push tops of the feet into the floor, elbows back, open up the shoulders, open up the collarbone. Take your inhale to open up the front of the heart into your cobra. Now, for some of you, you will be lifting up only a few inches, maybe a millimeter, maybe a little bit more. And then you exhale yourself down. So that would be an option for your back bend, is a cobra. Now, you might have enough strength in your shoulders and hands, and you might be comfortable enough to push into your hands and lift yourself all the way up so that you can extend the arms long. Now here, I want to make sure that I'm not slouching into my shoulders. I want to roll those shoulders back. I want to push into the tops of my feet, and I hope that you can see my thighs are still on the floor. So technically, this is still a cobra. It's a much deeper version of cobra, but my thighs are still on the floor. And then I'm going to use my exhale to come back down. So regardless of if you're able to only lift a millimeter, a few inches, or if you can come up all the way to an extended arm, that back bend is a cobra. Now, if you can push into the tops of your feet back here and strengthen up your arms and your legs, so much so that you lift your thighs and knees up off the floor, then you are in an upward facing dog. Now that would be another expression or another version of your back bend. So I'm going to take my exhale and come back down to give my back a little bit of a break. So far, we've gone from downward facing dog, we've come to plank, we've lowered ourselves down, we've lifted the head, shoulders, heart into our back bend, but we're not quite ready, or not so much ready, we're not quite back into our downward facing dog, yeah? So from our back bend, wherever that may have been for you, cobra, we come back down and we have to push ourselves back up into downward facing dog. Now that for many people is probably going to be the hardest. So I am going to come up into my half plank. Remember the half plank? Elbows are back, and I'm going to try to push myself up into my half plank. And then I'm going to tuck my toes under, come to my full plank, and then pike, tailbone back, and now I'm in my downward facing dog again. Yes? So that's the vinyasa that we are going to work on today. Down dog, where you have the pike in your body. Then you come into your plank. You lower yourself down. You back bend. And then you lift yourself back up into downward facing dog. Now, even the versions that we did just now, perhaps you're not able to do that. Let's investigate a couple of different modifications that you can pick and choose and find the one that suits you best. Yeah? So, we know all our modifications for downward facing dog. So I'm not going to review those per se. But from downward facing dog, coming forward into plank, right away some people are going to be, well, I can't lower myself down. So here I go. There are my knees down. I'm still going to lower myself down, and as I'm going down, I'm still going to try to come slightly forward. I'm not going to go crazy, but as I'm lowering from my half plank, I'm still going to go forward and down. So I'm lowering into my push-up. I'm coming from high push-up into low push-up. I'm extending my legs. Pushing the elbows back, opening up the collarbone. I'm going to come up to my cobra. I'm going to lower down. I'm going to try to come back up into my half plank. Tuck the toes. Full plank. Downward facing dog. Yeah. So there is a version of this vinyasa where you do not go all the way down to the floor. You kind of hover in your plank position off the floor, and then you go into your back bend and into down dog. But we're not at that point just yet. This version of coming all the way down to your belly and choosing your back bend and then coming back up into downward dog, there is plenty of modifications for you to work on some strength. We might investigate the a little bit more advanced version of that vinyasa, maybe in the future. But for now, I want you to start picking and choosing these variations, right? There are different ways on how you can do it. Now, I know my favorite way that works for me, and you're going to notice that maybe in one of our flows, you're going to have an opportunity to do more than one vinyasa. So you might do a vinyasa one way on the first try, and then when you get to the second vinyasa, the third vinyasa, maybe you're getting a little tired and you have to change your modification. So that's why I want you to kind of know all of these different modifications so that you can pick and choose. Yes? So let's go over a couple more of them. Not so much a couple more, but let's kind of piece some different variations, different ways that you can put this vinyasa into your practice. So again, the vinyasa that I'm talking about is from downward facing dog. You can add this vinyasa in to get back into downward facing dog. So that's the one that we are talking about today, and we are checking out our different modifications. So let's go again. So from downward facing dog, again, I'm going to take a breath here or two. I'm just going to exhale. Get my spine nice and long. Get my hands nice and grippy and sturdy. Shoulders are nice and strong. Finish your exhale. And then let's try. I'm going to inhale myself forward to my plank. Exhale, lower myself down. Adjust the hands, adjust the feet. Inhale myself up into my back bend. Exhale, lower back down. Take a breath to prepare. Lift back up. Plank. Downward facing dog. Take a breath or two here if you're doing these along with me. Remember, you can take child's pose if you need. Finish that exhale. And once again, come forward to your plank. This time I'm going to go with that knee. Exhale, lower yourself down. Adjust the hands and feet. Tuck the tailbone under. Inhale into your back bend. I'm going to come up a little bit higher on this one. I'm going to tuck my toes right away here and go back to downward dog through my plank. There's my plank. Here's my downward facing dog. Drop the knees. Have a little break in child's pose. Give those wrists, those hands a little bit of a break. Give those shoulders a little bit of a break. Maybe catch your breath. This vinyasa here that we're working on today, for some it's going to be extremely easy, and for some not so much. Putting this vinyasa into your practice is really going to give you an opportunity to work on strengthening your arms and strengthening your shoulders. Now, when you decide to start putting these into your practice, make sure that you're picking a modification that works for you. Don't put these if they're causing you to really just die a miserable death. because you're not going to be very happy. You're not going to want to continue with your practice. So if you notice that you're trying to use that full plank version and you're just really, really, really struggling to lower yourself down, take the bent knee version. You're going to notice that I do that version the most. Because of my wrist, my shoulders, there's many things that are going on for my particular case, and that one works best for me right now. Okay? So let's try a couple more and see how they go. So again, from down dog, we're coming forward to some sort of a plank with long arms. So that's the top part of your push-up. Then we lower ourselves down. We go into a back bend. And then we pike ourselves back up. So that's basically what you're doing. Now you just have to find the right modification for yourself. Yes? All right, let's go. Again. So, with my hands. Here's my downward facing dog. Finish my exhale. And here we go. Come forward to your plank. Inhale forward. Exhale to lower yourself down. Adjust the hands and feet, the tailbone. Inhale up into your back bend, whichever one it happens to be. And then exhale yourself through plank up into downward facing dog. We always take a breath or two here before we continue. Now we're going to do that again. Inhale forward to your plank. Here's another version. Exhale, lower yourself down. Aim the elbows to the sky. Tops of the feet into the floor. Tuck the tailbone. Inhale into your back bend. Here's my baby cobra, very low cobra. I'm going to bring myself back down. Push myself up into that half plank. Extend the legs, full plank. And then we're facing dog. One last one for good measure. Forward, inhale to your plank. Exhale, lower yourself down. Inhale into your back bend. Exhale, up into downward facing dog. Drop your knees. Come into your tabletop. And just take a little wiggle jiggle here. Maybe sway your knees, sorry, not your knees, your hips. My knees are on the floor. Sway your hips side to side. And then maybe sit back into your child's pose and relax those hands. And remember, putting that vinyasa into your practice is going to be a little bit of work for your wrists. In this particular child's pose, maybe by now, you want to relax the shoulders forward, so allowing them to curve forward. If that's going to allow you to release the pressure. So just take another breath or two. To release, let go, rest. If you're still in child's pose, lift your torso up. And you can swing your feet around if you'd like to come to a sit, a cross-legged position. And just take another second or two there to rest. Relax the shoulders. Take a few deep breaths. And then as your body releases all and any tension that you may have created in attempting those vinyasas, you can bring your hands to prayer position just so that you give yourself that wonderful thank you. Release another exhale. And we'll finish this tutorial on our vinyasa by honoring the light within. Namaste. So there you have it. One version of vinyasa that we can start adding into our practice. Now again, choose what works best for you. Going from our downward facing dog to our plank, lowering ourselves down to the belly, coming up into your back bend, and then coming back up into downward facing dog. Those, how many was that? I don't know how many. There's not a lot of poses per se in there, but there are many modifications that you can do, depending on how you feel on that particular day. Whether your shoulders are not strong enough, whether you lack the mobility in your shoulders to open up, whether your low back doesn't have that space to get into that back bend. Pick the modification that works for you. Your cobra and upward facing dog, that back bending, it shouldn't hurt. You should feel an extension. You should feel your low back doing some work, but not so much that it's pinching and it's very uncomfortable. If you feel pain in your low back, basically you have come up too far for that particular moment in time. So choose a different variation that might work for you. And we are going to start putting those into our flows. And again, those are options. I think our next video, I'll show how you can put them in, where you can put them in, and where you can wait. Basically, you can come up into your downward facing dog and wait in your downward facing dog while other people are putting in that vinyasa. So you can just work on strengthening your wrist and your shoulders just in your downward facing dog. It's a really good move to work on that. So if you find that you're not quite ready to add this vinyasa into your flow, don't worry, you can add them in whenever you want. You can refer back to all the different modifications that we've had in today's video, and we can go from there. So that's it for today's video. And hopefully I will see you very soon. Bye for now.